Hey, it's Chuck. Today, Javon Boggs is out of the class. The best left tackle in the country is coming to visit, and keep your NFL out of my college football. Let's get it. And I don't think he's going to throw the ball as much as he thinks he's going to throw the ball now that Chip Kelly's on board. And I'm happy about that. More quarterback. The truth is, Ryan Day has made a change philosophically, but it's none of those. You all know who wins. LSU is the drunkest fan base in the country. And welcome into Juck on Bucks. Some guys you make exceptions for. TJ Alford, he is going to announce his decision at the end of this week. And after he announces that decision, he's going to go ahead and take 4 official visits. DeCorian Moore, committed to LSU, the number 1 wide receiver in the class. He's out taking visits. You know, some guys you make exceptions for. Javon Boggs, when Brian Hartline first offered him, he was outside the top 300. He was a diamond in the rough. Brian Hartline was attempting to find him. I liked that kid more than a lot of people. He was listed at 6 foot. I don't think he was 6 foot. He's not fast. That's very evident. But he catches everything. He was super productive in high school, which I think a lot of times we overlook because we just look at measurables. So productive that he was Mr. Florida. But, you know, the physical tools weren't great. There's no denying that. But when Brian Hartline says, I like this kid enough to give him an offer at wide receiver, hey, buddy, I'm going to go with Hartline every time. Brian Hartline pretty much is responsible for raising that kid's ranking from outside the top 300 to up inside. He's like 180 range now, and perhaps a little higher some places else. That's his 247 composite. But he's out. So he's out of the class. He decommits because he was going around taking official visits. Or not officials, going around taking visits. He was at Missouri. He was intending to go other places. And, you know, some guys you make exceptions for. A guy like that, you don't. Now, I understand why he was out taking visits. He sees the writing on the wall with DeCorian Moore and Khalil Lockett and Vernell Brown and Jamie French. You know, at least 2 of those guys are going to end up in this class at Ohio State, and maybe 3. And that's not a good spot for a guy like Javon Boggs to be in. So, you know, whatever. He did what he had to do and go took those visits. And Ohio State said, look, we're going to decommit you. This kid didn't decommit. Let's be honest here. He got decommitted. Jeremy Birmingham tweeted as much last night. And, you know, when you talk about a guy like Jeremy Birmingham, you know, I think he's pretty well respected by most people in Buckeye Nation. And let's be honest, he talks to the coaches. They tell him what's going on. It is what it is. I don't like that kind of fraternizing between beat reporters or guys that cover the team and the coaches, but that's just the truth. Ryan Day admitted as much when he was sitting talking across from him. So I'm going to go ahead and go with that. The Javon Boggs was decommitted. And that's fine, whatever. Like I said, TJ Alford, you know, that's the number 1 target, and he hasn't yet committed. But this trend is weird of these guys committing and then going and visiting places afterwards. And it is, it's growing. And I got to think it's about the money. You know, they're getting, in some cases, money to go take these visits. And who can fault them? If you're going to go get paid to go visit someplace nice and get pampered and a bunch of people, you know, fall all over you, why not? Why not? But, you know, it's not great. It's definitely not great for LSU when we talk about DeCorian Moore. And I think DeCorian Moore is not going to end up at LSU. You know, he's got Texas, Oregon, and Ohio State on that list, and I think one of those guys are going to end up with him. But when this Javon Boggs word broke yesterday, boy, let me tell you, I mean, the amount of trolling around the country, around our rivals, namely Notre Dame and Michigan, regarding Ohio State losing this commit was really something. As if this is, you're talking about wide receivers at Ohio State, and you think that this is going to make a difference at all. I mean, if anything, this is going to raise the recruiting rankings when the class finalizes and probably help the cause for the recruiting crown. So, I mean, Javon Boggs could have probably been a really good wide receiver at Ohio State, maybe. I don't know. He might never have seen the field. Who knows? But not a big loss, and the Buckeyes will keep on rolling. There's no doubt about that. Superstar offensive lineman David Sanders Jr. out of North Carolina is going to be in town this weekend. Now, David Sanders Jr. was not planning on coming up this spring, and this is big to get him in for a visit. This is really big, and Fry worked on it hard. And as much as we knock on Justin Fry, I mean, the guy's swinging. Recruiting offensive line and the really big defensive interior lineman and edge, but particularly the biggest guys there are, it's just tough. It's really tough. They're rare. They're rare dudes. That's why you just basically saw them at Georgia and Alabama. Sometimes they wind up at Auburn. Sometimes Clemson gets one or two. Every once in a while we get one. But, primarily they stay between the two hot schools in the SEC, whichever schools those are for that particular cycle. And there's just not that many of them. There's just not that many mammoth dudes at that age. And David Sanders is one of them, and he's going to be tough to get. He's going to be tough to get because he's a real heavy Clemson lean right now, because he really wants to stay close to home. And he's from North Carolina. Clemson looks like the leader in the clubhouse for sure. And the kids talked several times about, wanting to stay close to home. And he even said once that Ohio was really far. Now, I mean, that's not really far. And maybe he'll understand that when he makes the trip this week. I don't know. It sounds like maybe he hasn't been too far from home before. But that's not a far trip. And look, Paris Johnson's mom is coming into town. I think that's awesome. She's going to talk to the kid. I guess they have a bit of a relationship. Tavian St. Clair is going to be in town, and we've talked 100 times about Tavian St. Clair and Devin Sanchez leading this class and assisting in recruiting. And kudos to Tavian for coming and making that trip. And he's going to work as hard as he can to get David Sanders in this class. Carter Lowe, stud tackle from Toledo, Justin Fry's biggest win in recruiting. He's going to help. And it's all guns, man. The big guns are out, and they're trying to get this guy to see the light, because the light is not at Clemson, David Sanders. That's for sure. The light is definitely not at Clemson. But the fact that he was originally not coming and now he's going to come, I think it means a lot. I do. And Fry gets a lot of crap, man. And it's a tough job that he's got in recruiting offensive linemen. But the fact is, he just does have to do better. He does. He has to do better. And there's just not a whole lot of momentum on a lot of these guys on the offensive line. We're not seeing, we talk about recruiting every week. We're not seeing a whole lot of momentum at the offensive line. And we need to see better, and we need to see better coaching. And I think that we're going to see a whole heck of a lot better play this year out of the offensive line. But we got a report yesterday that McLaughlin was lined up at guard. I heard another one this morning that McLaughlin was actually doing really well at center again. And he was finally, it was clicking for him. The offense was clicking for him. So, you got McLaughlin playing good, Hinsman playing good. We got really good reports about Fryer. And I just got a feeling that this offensive line is coming around. Luke Montgomery, the kid's, he was a highly rated recruit. He's a lot bigger than he was. He's coming in. He's probably going to start this year somewhere, most likely right guard. And I really think, as much as everybody was knocking this line and questioning this line coming in, that I got a little faith that this is going to be a solid offensive line. I really think it's going to be. And if they can, develop these guys, and Fry can start learning how to develop a little better, and we can see a little more production in that area, then you don't need the David Sanders to be a successful offensive line, that kind of guy. Of course, it's always a wonderful thing to have, but you can do it without those superstar recruits like that. Michigan just did it. So you definitely can with really good offensive line coaching. And, like I said, those kind of guys are rare, and you're just not always going to have them. But he definitely does got to do better in development. And I hope, maybe it's wishful thinking, but working with Chip Kelly in tandem, his buddy, they've worked together before, that we're going to see a much better offensive line. And I'm really excited about the reports coming out from some of those guys on the offensive line and how much better they're doing this year. I think that's really promising. So hopefully we can swing David Sanders our way. But I think he's probably going to end up at Clemson, and this is a pretty long shot. I was bebopping around today and stumbled across this on 247, and it ranked the top 10 best stadium environments from 2023, and the Bucks were number 10 on this list. Always irritating to be number 10 on a list, but we didn't have many big games last year at the Shoe, and sometimes that's how it goes. And this has been an ongoing talk for years about the environment at the Shoe and how you can make it better. Look, you talk about the student section in the end zone. That's a bad thing for that. People complain about the older folks and the prices, and these kind of things keep out, younger, rowdier people. The lack of night games, particularly now with Fox and the big noon kickoff being their number one game, and a lot of times the Buckeyes have that, and all that contributes. But the biggest part is lack of big games and opponents who have the capability to compete. There's only a couple games a year that happens, but I've got a lot of excitement in this conference realignment that I didn't have previously with the number of big-time games we're going to get coming up in the near future. And it's going to get even better when Florida State and Notre Dame join the Big Ten. But one Jack Swarbrick, Notre Dame AD, former Notre Dame AD, he just retired. I've made fun of this guy for a long time. But he came out and made some statements the other day since he's retired. By the way, the guy that took over for him as the new AD of Notre Dame is a former chairman for NBC Sports. So they're just leaning all in every conference on hiring these TV guys to come in and lead the conferences. It's almost embarrassing at this point. They're just putting it right out there. Like, there's no reason that TV guys should be running football conferences, or not football conferences, conferences. It's just ridiculous. And they're just straight up saying, like, this is all about the TV money. But anyway, he said, in regards to Notre Dame, I found this funny. He thinks that they have assembled the best staff there, the football staff that they've ever had. And Al Golden and Mike Denbrock are the best offensive and defensive coordinator combination in the country, and I beg to differ, Swarbrick. Talking about who's going to leave the conferences, he said that his crystal ball is cloudier than ever, and that's saying something. What an egomaniac, man. This guy, I've always made fun of him because he's such an egomaniac, and he fits Notre Dame so well. Then he says there are schools that might, if they move, change a whole lot of things, but we're probably the first among that, and we're not likely to. He also said, I don't see a catalyst right now. The Big Ten and the SEC have assets they need to position themselves for the next media negotiation. I understand the ACC disgruntled members, but I'm not sure there are better options for them. The ACC's legal position is a very strong one. Now, that's really interesting because I think a lot of people think that Florida State and Clemson are going to be able to get out of this grant of rights here coming up real soon in some way, shape, or form, and that Florida State's going to go to the Big Ten, Clemson's going to go to the SEC, and Notre Dame will also be going to the Big Ten. But Swarbrick, I mean, look, I make a lot of fun of the guy, but he knows a lot, and he's in on every one of these meetings. So this is the first time I've really heard anybody kind of counter this so vehemently. He doesn't think Notre Dame's going anywhere, and he doesn't think that those guys are going to be able to get out of the ACC. So I thought that was interesting. I'm going to see what the reaction is from some of the guys who know a little more about this in the national media than I do. But that just came out, and I find it really interesting that he absolutely doesn't think Notre Dame's going anywhere. I was under the impression that was going to happen relatively soon, within the next 2 years at the most. I certainly want it to happen. And again, this conference realignment I don't like, but the fact that we're going to get more big games out of it, that I love. The playoff expansion, I don't love it. I thought 6 or 8 would have been a great number. But the fact that we can now lose a couple games and still make the playoff means we get to play bigger games and, afford a loss. So I'm all for it. And that's going to help the environment at the home games, and I'm all for that too. My middle son came to me. He's the one that really likes football, the only one. And this was probably last month, and he said, Dad, the NFL is implementing a new kickoff rule. Do you remember the XFL kickoff rule? And I said, absolutely not. I don't think I've ever watched an XFL game in my life. And he said, well, and he starts explaining this gimmicky sounding rule. I said, son, there's no chance the NFL is adopting that rule. And he said, trust me, they are. Well, he called me gloating last night and said, Dad, check this out. Sure enough, they have adopted this rule. So I actually paid attention this time to figure out what the heck this thing was. And it's very interesting. So the kicker stands at his own 35. The receiving team lines up on their 35, and they're 5 yards between two lines of dudes, and they can't hit each other until the kick gets to the two return men. There's two return men deep, and then they got to land in the landing zone. If they don't land in the landing zone, if it goes out of bounds or short, they get it at the 35. If it goes, or the 40, all this jazz, right? So it sounds really weird, but I think that we'll adapt to it pretty quickly in the NFL. And I think it's pretty cool because kickoffs have become so incredibly boring that it's just a formality. We never return them. And I really hope college football adopts this thing because I think it's going to be really fun. Maybe add some action back to the kickoff because it's so boring. And when you think about it, you know, you look at basketball, the 3-point line, guys get really good at threes, you move the line back. Well, kickoffs, you know, when football first started, I doubt you saw very many touchbacks. They couldn't kick it that far. Now it's automatic, you know, automatic. And why not? And it's dangerous. It is a dangerous play. And I'm not one who usually likes to change rules based on things like that because football is just a dangerous game inherently. And you know that getting into it. But you know what I didn't like? The extra point in the NFL moving back. And I didn't like it because even though the extra point is a formality, back the old extra point was a formality, and the new extra point creates a lot more drama, and I'm all for rules that create more drama. It also creates more, it just makes the kicking game more important, and I don't like making the kicking game more important because field goal kickers aren't football to me. So I don't like, you know, adding importance onto that. And that's different than kickoffs. You might say like that's a double standard. You just said you want the kickoff rule, but the kickoff and the kickoff return and the kickoff coverage team, that is football. Those are football players making plays. An extra point and a field goal are not football players making plays. That's strictly a kicker making a play. The amount of times we see a blocked field goal are, you know, next to none. So that's not really a football play. And I don't like adding extra value to the kicking game when it comes to that. So that's my take on that. I hope that doesn't come to college football, but this kickoff rule, I'm all for. What I'm not for coming to college football is this hip drop tackle rule that the NFL has adopted because, you know, I just find it, I find it absurd. I understand that there have been some replays that we've seen that really look bad, almost look intentional, like a guy is, you know, intentionally swinging his body weight down into the guy's legs as he's pulling his hips back. And it looks awful. It really does. It looks terrible. But there are just situations when you're making a tackle where your momentum is going a certain way, his momentum is going a certain way, and the only way you can bring him to the ground is by throwing your body weight down. You can't always load and explode through someone. You know, if you're coming off a block as a linebacker and a back is coming to your side, you don't have momentum behind you to hit through him. You have to grab him and fall back. You just have to. Or he drags you 3 yards and breaks the tackle. That's just part of football. I don't see how they're going to enforce this because you could probably call this play. It's going to be really interesting. It's going to be really interesting to see how they enforce this and when they call this. But you're adding another element to an already convoluted system of rules at this point that we see every week in the NFL particularly. But you know how controversial targeting is. You know, what's a targeting, what's not. We argue about it every week, every single game. There's a couple hits, and it's a controversy over whether it's a targeting or not. And this is just going to be a whole nother one of those. And now you're just talking about tackles. Thankfully, we've seen tons of players come out against this rule. NFL players, respected ones, saying this is absolutely ridiculous. There is no such thing as a hip drop tackle. This is just a tackle. Now, there is such thing as a hip drop tackle, but it is it's kind of a rugby term. And if you look back at rugby, they've been training and teaching this kind of tackle for a long time. This tackle was actually taught back in the 2000s as a safe way to tackle in the early 2000s. when, the head and the concussion stuff was first coming out. This was the method that they said was safe. So they were teaching this. I remember a whole thing in Seattle about it. Pete Carroll, when he first took over at Seattle, they were teaching to tackle like this as a way to protect your head and protect those big collisions. So they went from teaching this style of tackling as the norm to now it's illegal. I just find it ridiculous. I don't know how you're supposed to play defense. And when you're in those situations and you've played football and you've tackled people, there's no way that anybody who wrote this rule could have ever played football. I just guarantee it. There's no chance. How can you possibly agree with this? I don't get it. I really just don't understand it at all. But the good news is, I don't think, generally what happens is when something like this comes out in the NFL and you see the blowback, college football waits and sees how everybody reacts and then kind of adjusts accordingly. Notice college football has never gone to the ridiculous rules of roughing the quarterback that the NFL has, bringing your weight down too hard. College football's not adopted any of that. So kudos to them for that. And I understand why the NFL has to do that, because quarterbacks are so valuable to their bottom line. And to be honest, look, we all like NFL football. And when there's a matchup and the starting quarterback is not playing in that matchup, it takes away a ton of it. It's just not interesting anymore. So I get it from that point of view. But I'm very happy that college football has looked at that and said, yeah, we don't want any part of that. And my hope is that they do that with the hip drop tackle thing too. And my hope is also that this will be a short-lived rule in the NFL, but we'll have to see how often it's called, because I just got a feeling it's going to have to be an egregious-looking thing to make the call. I watched a clip of a demonstration of, okay, what is a hip drop tackle? What are they considering a hip drop tackle, and what are they not? And they literally showed the same exact tackle, but the only difference in the one that was illegal and the one that was not was the one that was not illegal. The runner of the ball had hit his leg in the stride. So his leg was forward when the guy dropped, but in the other one, his leg was back and the guy dropped on his legs. But the technique that the tackler used was exactly the same in both videos. And that's just like, what are we doing here? This is just absurd. But anyway, we'll see how long it lasts. I can't imagine it's going to last long, and I can't imagine they're going to call it much. Because if they do, they're going to realize that there are way more tackles that happen like this with the criteria that they listed and called a hip drop tackle than they think. I really believe that. So we'll see. But I am not looking forward to the way this thing is coming about, and I hope it's not in college football, because I care way more about college football than the NFL, and I think this is an absolute ridiculous rule, to be honest. I understand player safety. I understand that there are some guys that broke their legs in gruesome ways, and it sucks. And at times, there's a couple of them that almost look intentional. You go back to the horse collar and the origin of the horse collar. That was a technique. I mean, I forget his name. He played for the Cowboys. Was it Roy Williams? But he started doing that, and he broke a couple guys' legs like that. And then it started catching on he was intentionally letting them go forward by him and sticking his hand in the back of the shoulder pads. It was an intentional move and a very dangerous move. So I understand the origin of that one. And, you can bring him down in a different way. But there are times when you are making a tackle when there is no other way to bring the guy to the ground but to drop your body weight down. It's just a fact. So hopefully this is a short-lived rule. And we're seeing a whole lot of very important people and very, Hall of Famers come out and really bash this thing. So my hope is this will be a short-lived one. But we'll see, man. We got another one coming out bashing the Florida Gators. Another transfer, Prince Umamaniemi-Ellen. Prince Umamaniemi-Ellen. Transferred to Ole Miss, and he came out this week at a press conference, and he was talking about his time at Ole Miss, and he took a really nasty shot at the defensive coaches at Florida, saying that, they basically told me to go to that spot and figure it out, and now he's getting real coaching at Ole Miss. And as a guy who grew up in the Spurrier era and how fun the Gators were. And from there, you had a couple of down coaches, and then you get to Urban Meyer. Watching Florida turn into what they've turned into has just been just really bizarre. When you went from Urban Meyer to Will Muschamp, and then Jim McElwain, Dan Mullen, and now Billy Napier, just a run of total trash. And Billy Napier is clearly not cut out for this. And when you look at this schedule, man, I've pulled it up before, but I just can't get over it. Miami, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, UCF, and Tennessee to start off the season, and you end with Kentucky, Georgia, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and Florida State. I mean, that last 5 games is just the craziest schedule I've ever seen. And I got to tell you, I'm jealous. Could you imagine playing this schedule? This would be so much fun to get up for all these games every week. I would absolutely love it. And, you know, you could probably go, Ohio State could probably go 8-4 with this schedule. But if they beat Georgia, Texas, LSU, and Florida State, make the playoffs because of those quality wins, that would be something. That would really be something. I would love it. But it's really something to see how far they've fallen. And about Georgia, Buckeye basketball lost in the NIT last night to Georgia, and the Georgia Trolls are coming at us hard about it. My old buddy Uncle Lou had something to say about it.
It's about, oh, the only reason Ohio State can't beat the SEC, woo, is because, well, we always have to play down south. Well, Georgia just took the world's worst basketball team on the planet. Well, I guess the second worst. You have the worst basketball team on the planet, but Georgia just took the second worst basketball team on the planet across the Mason-Dixon line into the shithole state that is Ohio, into the worst city in Ohio, Columbus, onto your own campus and your own stadium, and beat the absolute soul and will to live out of you.
Now, that gentleman there is Uncle Lou, and Uncle Lou has been doing college football videos for like 10 years. He talks a lot of crap. He's loud and boisterous, but he knows his stuff, and he is pretty entertaining to listen to. He's one of the guys that kind of said, you know what, got me to say, I can do this too. Not his style at all. I'm not his style, but I just looked at him and said, if this fool can do that, I can definitely do it too.
Again, they beat Ohio State again. Georgia, too much for you.
Anyway, a lot of the things he says are ridiculous, but some of the stuff he says is spot on, and one of those is his take on Josh Pate, who I am so sick of, this dude, and the fact that he has gotten so big and so influential in college football, doing what he does, which is essentially telling everybody that their team and their coach is great, everything's cool, everything's fine, and everybody just buys into this crap. The next time this guy says something bad about Billy Napier, he thinks Billy Napier's a good coach. He does. I mean, I'm telling you, the next time he says something bad about a coach or a team will be the first time. He just blows smoke up everybody's, you know what, and everybody loves him because of it. He's smooth. He really is. But this latest crap that he came out about with this transfer portal prediction, because he's talked to listen, he talks good about everybody, so he gets all this access, and he can go on the road and kiss these coaches' rear ends. He sits across from them, and just it's almost sad the way he just butters up to him, particularly Kirby Smart. He's from Georgia and clearly a Georgia fan. And oh, does he love Kirby? He even turns on his old Georgia boy accent when he's talking to Kirby. But the whole thing about the transfer portal that he just came out and just has everybody in a tizzy about the transfer portal with his bold prediction that we're going to see the transfer portal be crazier than it's ever been. What a bold prediction. Since the transfer portal started to be basically like no rules, every single time it's opened, we've seen it be way worse than the last time. So not really a crazy bold prediction to say that the next one is also going to be totally off the hook. So way to go out on a limb there, Pate. But I'm so sick of this dude, and I'm so sick of everybody's all up in arms. What's going to happen? Oh, Pate talked to this guy, and this coach told him that an entire wide receiver staff or an entire wide receiver room was going to transfer from one school, and that coach already knew who was coming in to replace him. That's not news. Okay. We know that everybody's tampering with this thing and nobody's enforcing anything. That's not news. He is so obnoxious with his, I know this and I know that. And I'm just trying to warn you guys. Just warn you. Just look out. I can't stand him. He's such a fraud, but he's really good at what he does because he comes off as so genuine and so sweet and so nice and knowledgeable. And man, has he got his show going. The dude is just on top of the world right now. However, I see him for what he is. But so does Uncle Lou. And I respect Uncle Lou a whole hell of a lot more than I respect Josh Pate and his nonsense and the way he goes about his show and just glad handing with these coaches for access. Never will say a bad word about him. Look, if you watch his show, listen for that. I quit a long time ago because I cannot stand his shtick. But I'm really sick of this because I've talked to a lot of people this week who are concerned about this transfer prediction that he's made, that this may be somehow related to Ohio State in some way, which it's definitely not. Ohio State's not going to lose anybody to the transfer portal of consequence. I can almost guarantee that. But, you know, I'm just sick of him. And I prefer the guy that sits here and talks crap about other people's teams than a guy that just tells everybody they're great and they're in good standing. And he's just obnoxious, and I can't stand him. And as we're talking about people who cover college football, we've got some folks that I saw today who cover Ohio State football who were, I don't know, kind of coming into the corner of Tony Alford, and this isn't a big deal when he left, and Ohio State's just going to be fine, and they're just going to hop in and get whoever they want. It'll definitely be an upgrade. It's not a big deal, blah, 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 who now all of a sudden have realized what I said all along, that the timing is such that you are asking somebody else to screw their employer over and burn a bridge to come to Ohio State. And this is not just going to be all gravy like everybody was talking about it was going to be. And yes, what Tony Alford did was unprofessional, and poor timing was not the word for it. It was Bush League. It wasn't poor timing. But the timing was such that it has now made this a real issue, and the Buckeyes still are, you know, they're probably down to plan C here, which may just be what Ryan Day said his plan was for the offensive coordinator. If he got to plan C or to tier C, that he was just going to keep play calling himself. So is that the case now with the running back coach? I would imagine so. Now, we talked about yesterday the thing floating around about the 1 year deals that he was offering to people. That was floating around. I hadn't seen it from any reputable source, and I still haven't. So I looked for it. I can't find it anywhere other than people saying it. So I'm guessing it came from Twitter. And you know what else came from Twitter is that Quinn Shawn and Caleb Downs are transferring to Michigan. So until I see that somewhere, I'm going to call that a bunch of nonsense. I just cannot see Ryan Day going to Robert Gillespie and DeMarco Murray and trying to pull them away from Alabama and Oklahoma with a 1 year deal. Obviously, they would never do that. So to make that offer would just be insulting. And DeMarco Murray would never have even been close to considering that. So I'm just calling nonsense on that. Absolute nonsense. Until somebody can show me where that article was sourced from, where the story came from, I believe it was a Twitter rumor. I put some feelers out to a couple people today. Nobody can tell me where this thing came from. So look, I don't know where it came from, but I don't buy it for a second. I do not buy that because there's no chance. There's just no chance. It would be insulting. You know, hey, Robert Gillespie and DeMarco Murray, burn a bridge with somebody and leave them in a lurch for a 1 year deal. And if you do good, then maybe I'll give you a couple. I just don't buy it. I don't buy it until I see different. But a lot of people are talking about Ryan Day and his mismanagement of this situation based on that 1 year deal thing. And I'm trying to find it. I can't find it anywhere. Where did he say this? Where are people saying that this 1 year deal came from? Because if so, I will be as equally irritated and bothered if that is the case. But I can't find it anywhere. But I'm seeing people say it as it's a fact. And I just don't, I'll never say something like it's a fact unless I see someone that I trust or someone who's reputable say that that's what happened. And I've yet to see that. So if anybody can see that, please find that, put it in the comments for me so I can vet it and make an accurate statement on it. But until then, man, I just don't buy it. I don't think there's any way. Ryan Day is a sharp dude, and he knows doggone well, as any of us know, not even in the business, that Robert Gillespie or DeMarco Murray would not leave Oklahoma or Alabama in a lurch for a one-year deal to make what's not a lateral move, because Ohio State has a much better running back room and maybe is a better place to work slightly than Oklahoma. It's not a better place to work than Alabama. Those are equal jobs. That's a lateral move to most people. Most people on the outside looking in would say lateral move, burn a bridge at one of the biggest and best places to work in the country, and go work at the same job at the other school. It just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense to me. So yeah, that's my take on that. Got a lot of questions about it. The other day I did a show about Georgia, Georgia and Ohio State being the it team, not Georgia, and Ohio State being the odds-on favorite in my book to win the national championship. Well, the odds were updated today, and there are some new things going on here at MGM, and Ohio State has closed the gap significantly. Georgia is plus 350. Ohio State is plus 425. Now, I got a lot of comments when I put that out from particularly a lot of Georgia folks who thought that I was absolutely crazy. Georgia will stomp Ohio State. Kirby's got 2 national championships. Ryan Day's got none. Kirby's fake punt at the end of the game, the semifinal game, showed how much better of a coach he was. Ryan Day's bad coaching decisions, his bad coaching hires. We are very honest fans when it comes to our team. And everything that I just laid out that this Georgia fan said to me are things we've discussed. But something changed for me. How about you?
Well, I mean, I think what's changed is just the reality of the program right now. Of course, we know this. You got the 2-13 record against the SEC, but really, I think this all started, of course, in the national championship game against Florida in 2006. Ohio State was embarrassed. Went back next year. Played a pretty solid game against LSU. I think that that was a close game, closer than the score. I mean, if you watch the game, it was a good game. But again, it was another SEC team. So, and I can't say that calling Ohio State soft. I mean, it's always strange to me, calling these, our offensive and defensive line soft when these are huge, huge tough guys, individually. But yeah, there have been a lot of games over the years where those lines haven't performed the way that you would think they would, even a lot of times against lesser talent. I mean, I remember when we played San Diego State, it must have been 17, 18 years ago. Their defensive line was pushing us around. I mean, I think, like you say, being objective, we've seen it, but none of that matters this year. None of it matters. No. I mean, these things aren't in the water. Okay. And I think that they're just not. And I think that, this year, if you look at the defensive line that we're going to be bringing, it's going to be pretty scary to a lot of teams. I think even top level teams, I think they're going to have their way with a lot of opponents. And as far as the offensive line, I know you covered this a whole lot on your show. There's a lot of cohesion, and they are going to be older. They are going to be bigger. They are going to be smarter. They're going to know the system better. I'm pretty excited to watch that offensive line this year. I think they're going to get the job done pretty effectively. So on both sides of the ball, I think we're going to see a vast improvement because, again, this has nothing to do with any other year except for 2024.
And with that offensive line, we've now got Justin Fry working with Chip Kelly again. So these two are back together, and you got Chip Kelly designing an offense for, yes, an unproven quarterback at Ohio State, but a Big 12 winning quarterback should Will Howard be the one to win that job, which I believe he will. Regardless, Carson Beck, he's very good. But I think more to the point is just the dismissive nature that schools like Georgia have of Ohio State. And it's not just them. We see it all over the place because Ohio State has lost a lot of big games, high-profile games. And Ohio State has been in a lot of them and been successful in a lot of them. And Recently, I keep hearing what a lousy program Ohio State is because they've only won 2 national championships this decade or this century. Uh, that's a great thing. That's not a bad thing. Nick Saban and his run has really skewed the way people view this. There's no doubt about that. We know that. But Georgia, what they did was very impressive. This Georgia team isn't that Georgia team. Definitely not the first one. It's not the second one either. And the second one, we just played them. I mean, what happened there? Because apparently we're some joke that they can just push around.
Yeah, that was obviously a really hard fought game on both sides of the ball. Um, Personally, I honestly I thought we were the better team that night. But if you don't score the most points, which happens to be the goal of the game, I guess you're not. But play in and play out, I thought we were the better team that night. Regardless, it was pretty. I mean, it was a 1 point game anyway. You want to slice it. Uh, I think that and then that goes back to the Ryan Day point and the mistakes that he's made in the past, which is what a lot of people are pointing to in-game decisions. Um, yeah, and so that was one of them for us because as Ohio State fans, we're more acutely aware of those in-game mysterious choices that he's made. And for that last field goal, obviously, you and I have discussed, gosh, if we could have just picked up another 5 or 6 yards that I think they would have happily given us, that field goal goes through. So I'm not going to talk about ifs, but we were right there. And I think coming in this year with this roster, all these guys coming back on defense, adding Caleb Downs, which is just, I mean, he's a game changer in and of himself. Jack Sawyer obviously coming along. JT is going to be, looking to be that early pick this year. And then you go on offense. A lot of people, and I know you discussed this too. Abuka is he's a top receiver going into this year, so we're not replacing Marvin Harrison Jr., but we have weapons there, including that top receiver there. And with Chip running that offense, I've never been more excited about the production that I think that we're going to have this year. Could be totally wrong, but I guess it would be quite an enigma if Chip Kelly can't get this offense rolling on teams.
I think so too. When we talk about Ryan Day and mistakes at the end of games, yep, we've seen them. We acknowledge them. They want to point them out to us. I commend him for giving up his baby, which is calling plays. We talk about him wanting to be the CEO of the program and such. I think a lot of it is to be free of that at the end of games to make better decisions, which I think has been kind of a point that's not been discussed as much as he needs to be the CEO type guy. That's been, the main thing discussed. But I think a lot of this has to do with in-game coaching and him being freed up to make better decisions in game. So I commend him for that. And, listen, I don't know how much I've talked about this on the show, but my brother and I were out on this guy. We were out. We were done with this dude. There's no doubt about it. But when you see a smart person accept their flaws and make changes, you got a dangerous guy. And I think Ryan Day has now become a dangerous guy, and he's made this program a very dangerous program because of those changes he's made.
I think, and also what you say, it goes more to the point of that image of being soft. I think that Ryan Day could have rightfully be perceived as soft. But I think that we saw him pivot earlier in the season. We saw him on the sidelines getting very amped up, getting very angry, yelling the way we'd never seen him yell before at his own players, at the referees. He just kind of wasn't having it anymore. And I think that he personally has changed. And then we saw that go into the off season with what you could probably call a bit of a cutthroat move, bringing in Sayin. Which I think, that would be a difficult one to turn down, but nonetheless, he had that decision to make and he did make it. So I just think that, the team is not soft if you could have called them soft before. And I think that Ryan Day is not soft if you could have called him soft before.
I think you might have been able to say that before, and maybe not anymore. There's no doubt. He has definitely shown me that he's going to do whatever it takes to win. That's the way it feels to me. And his actions have shown that. And he's a smart guy, and smart people learn from their mistakes. And no, he's not yet kicked the door down, but he's been darn close. And after 5 years, Kirby Smart had yet to kick the door down either.
Yeah, so one of the comments that kind of got us going down this track was that Kirby, it's just ridiculous. Kirby has 2 natties and Day has none. Well, Kirby's been at it longer, and yes, he has 2 and Day had none. And when Kirby finally kicked the door in, he was facing Alabama and Nick Saban, who had 5, and Kirby had none. Now, Georgia fans or any other fan base completely discount Georgia because it was 5 championships to none? I doubt it, and it's not really something that I'm personally going to consider. And again, you know, when you talk about the big games, he hasn't been great in big games, but I think that we're getting closer and closer. What was the Clemson game? 17, 31-0. Right, and then next time we played Clemson, I think it was 26-23, somewhere in that neighborhood. So you just see them getting closer, and then you see us win that game. And so I think that obviously there's, you know, everyone has the hang up on Michigan. We of course are, you know, none too happy about the last couple of years either. But he also has this year to even that record out and probably cruise to a whole bunch more after that.
I think absolutely that's going to happen, but that's more based, in my opinion, on the state of their program more than the state of his. But yeah, let's just put it this way. If he doesn't, we got a problem. But I think that we both agree that no matter what happens this season as far as the end result, you know, if you lose to Michigan or if you don't win a championship, I'm more sold on him now than I've ever been as the guy that is the right guy to lead this program when I was not before. And if we come out and see these guys play the way, that's the key to me. How do they play? If they play the way we think they're going to play, if they got the fire, if they got the attitude, if that brotherhood translates onto the field, and if they win a lot of games, they don't need to win a championship to satisfy me, because I think that he's set the program up in a way now that it is going to maintain that level of success, and that door will be kicked in at some point. If we see the improvement in the season like we've seen during the offseason and the decisions that he's making, if we see that same kind of decision improvement during the season, he's our guy, man. I'm happy with the dude, and that's a big flip from where I've been at the last couple years of his career, where I've seriously doubted if he was the guy to lead the program.
I don't think that we, because I know the way we felt, or any other Buckeye fan that was not sold on him, was necessarily wrong. But I do think that we've seen him make a fundamental change, and it's all been for the better. And I think that, yes, like you said, you know, after that Missouri game, of course, we were ranting and raving, and it wasn't the first time. But when you see what he's done in the offseason, doing everything you could have asked for him to do and more, I think he's made a fundamental change. And yes, if he makes that and he continues to maintain this attitude and just the level of success that he's had in the offseason. I know there's no offseason championships, but, you know, guess what? That's what sets your team up for the next year. I don't know, you know, if anyone's aware of that. That's kind of, yeah, you actually get all that settled before the season started, and it's pretty important. If he continues on this way, yes, he will. He will be that guy, and I agree with you. I would not be done with him, whether it's this season or not, because I think the guy that we're seeing now is the guy that we've wanted to see this whole time. We haven't, and well, now we are.
If we could just say, for instance, we'll take George out of and say, like, if we were sitting here watching Texas have this offseason that Ohio State had, we're watching Texas get Chip Kelly in, and have their entire defense that was ranked 3rd in the country come back, and then get Caleb Downs over there and snag Judkins to go along with, you know, let's say they had the best back already. If you watch that at Texas, I would be very concerned about my odds against Texas and how we're going to beat that team. But it seems like everyone wants to dismiss us, and that's fine. They'll find out. And I really think that Chip Kelly, aside from the returning seniors who are the biggest difference of all, I think that Chip Kelly is going to make such an impact that they just really have no idea yet, and neither do we. But I mean, you see this guy, not just with his brilliance that we've seen over the years, but with how he's been so rejuvenated. I mean, he looks like he's just having a blast. And I have watched Chip Kelly over the last 3-4 years at press conference. I mean, Chip Kelly looked like a shell of himself as a man. He was just beat down. And I talked about it last week in the show that he, when I was railing on Dion about that lack of visits, Jim Harbaugh and Steve Sarkisian, 148 and 127 visits in that time period since Dion's been at Colorado. Chip had 55, which, I mean, he just was burnt out. He was totally burnt out. And now you look at him and he's bebopping around. He's laughing. He's smiling. Get that guy in a good mental space. Let him do what he loves to do, which is coach offense. That's the difference.
If Chip Kelly goes to any top 5 or even top 10 program to be their offensive coordinator, I'm going to be terrified. And as you said, yes, he's clearly reinvigorated. This is his passion. He is an offensive savant, the best we've seen in 20 years, in college football, I would say without a doubt. It was fun to watch him, in his early days. And I mean, boy, just to think that that's going to be our team now, it's pretty exciting. But yes, the flip side of that, if he goes somewhere else, yeah, I'm going to be terrified. I guess a lot of fan bases aren't worried about it. They're not terrified. But as you said, we shall see.
Yeah, we shall. All right, bro. I'll talk to you later.
All righty.
So there he was. And that's a little snippet of me and my brother on the phone every day, talking college football as we do every day. And he's not the only guest we're going to have on this week. We're also going to have my buddy Luke from the Tailgate podcast, and that is a national college football podcast. And he is a Buckeye fan out of Nashville, and we also have some great conversations. And he's the guy that got me started into the show, so I'm very happy to have him on, and we're going to do that on part of our Sunday show. And we're also going to have Dylan Davis from the Delaware Gazette on, and Dylan's going to be at practice on Saturday for the student appreciation practice at the Woody. He's going to report back to us what he saw, and that's going to be a fun one too. You can follow Dylan here because he is going to put out some awesome videos from that practice, and he is a definite must follow if you like to see those clips from practice. So follow Dylan. Look out for that episode with Luke on Sunday. And that's my show today. I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Chuck on Bucks out.